here's what I'm talking about today. How I work with web developers, how I work with marketing consultants, and then I've got a little surprise announcement for everybody. Okay, web developers. Have you ever noticed that web developers have their own language? Most specialties have their own language, right? So developers talk about, you know, sitemaps and sidebars and navigation, and frequently what the client says is, I just want a pretty site. Yeah. Now, the thing about a pretty site is that it's got colors, and it's got layout, and it's got a logo, and it's got images, and it's got words. Clients generally understand that they need to provide all of that visually pretty stuff, but when asked about words, you get the deer in the headlights. Words? They don't just appear with my website? No, actually they don't. So what I do is I have a special pricing structure for developers so that they can just sort of slip me in as part of their team, and I act as the contact person between developer and client. And I translate the information from the developer to the client, and I translate the client into the developer. And what we do, though, is we have a process. I have this process for figuring out content that just happens to also create the sitemap and the navigation structure. And when you give me the extra questions to ask, we figure out all the rest of that. The other thing I can do, especially for people who don't like other people, is that I keep people on track. It's like if there's information that the developer needs, I can get on the client for that. Similarly, if the client needs to know something from the developer and they're not answering, translation, I'm a heck of a nag. So I've done this process many times, most recently with Cynthia. We sat and we had this conversation. We talked about what was going to go where, and what did we want to talk about, and what did we want to share, and ta-da! All of a sudden there's a sitemap for Sandeepa to work with. Makes life a lot easier for everybody because everybody gets to keep in the mindset that they work best in. Okay, marketing consultants. I am not a marketing professional. The consultant comes up with a marketing plan, and these days that plan generally includes things like a blog and a newsletter and such. The client loves the plan. I got to write. Don't love that part so much. So in this case, I act as part of the team. And I help the client and the consultant understand what all is needed, and we execute the consultant's plans to the client's satisfaction so that everybody's happy, nobody's going, I don't want to write, and I only have to nag a little bit, because I do that really well. So, remember her? Literally 2 years and a month ago, I talked about her in reference to the fact that I didn't ever want to have to write a book, but I was writing a book called How to Be a Writer Without Writing a Book. And I'm sort of at the point of no return. The publisher has it. It's about to be in typesetting. Thank God for Doug getting my design. That's the cover. And I am super excited and a bit nervous. And it's finally going to happen. So, either I spoke really fast or I really just didn't have enough to say this time. I've got 2 minutes. Any questions? Questions?
Do you know when we'll have the book in hand?
The goal for me is the end of the year. I'd like to be able to surprise my parents with a copy of it. It will be available both print on demand, so you can have a hard copy as well as an e-copy. Zach.
When you're beginning to try to write like a blog or a newsletter or something like that, how do you normally suggest they start? Is it kind of like a stream of consciousness kind of thing? Or?
What I do when working out blog topics, the thing I do for newsletters is the first thing we do is put in a piece of the blog that takes care of half the newsletter. So we talk about their interests. With really starting, I try to start with doing an extensive FAQ. So it's like, what are these questions that people are always asking you that really has some in-depth, not just when are my hours? I'm sorry, Google can answer that question. So that's where I try to start. And then it's, what are you thinking? What do you want? Let's hash it out. I like having conversations with my clients. I write a bunch of notes. They get to bounce all over the walls. I pull them back in. It's great. Brian.
Is it going to be available on audiobook?
I haven't gotten that far. The thought of reading my own book terrifies me, but having somebody else read it would only drive me nuts because I know how it's supposed to read because I have it in my head. Eden.
Writing a blog or a newsletter, do you prefer working with the client in like a meeting setting, or do you prefer just kind of having some information and being able to put it together yourself?
When I'm doing the writing itself, I like to do that on my own. I like to work with the client in terms of getting the content figured out. What are we going to write about? What are we going to talk about? What is your opinion on it? What kind of voice do you want to have with it? So I write on my own, and then I give it back to the client and say, okay, tell me what's wrong. And that's my time. Thank you very much.